We've all got a good idea about what we mean by a full English breakfast. It's eggs, bacon, sausages, fried bread, that sort of stuff that goes into it. But what happens when you were in wartime conditions back in the 1940s in Britain and you wanted a full English breakfast? Well, a lot of the food that would have gone in, the ingredients that would have gone in, would have been really difficult to come by. So we use alternatives, mock foods. And what we're going to do today is make a mock full English breakfast. So the sort of things that you're going to need are leftover potatoes. Now, the government was issuing advice constantly to people to eat potatoes rather than bread, because Britain could produce all our own potatoes, but we couldn't produce all our own wheat. We still had to import some of it. So the government propaganda was directed at people to get them to eat potatoes instead. We've got tomatoes here from the greenhouse, so if you were lucky enough to have a greenhouse or a garden or an allotment, you could grow food like that. So we can make sure that there are tomatoes in this breakfast. Now, it's a carrot. That is going to be our mock bacon. We're going to slice it thinly and fry it. But this breakfast is also going to have baked beans. Well, kind of baked beans. It's an alternative that I've come up with. It's broad beans and ketchup. Now this is blackberry and gooseberry ketchup. It's homemade, made up last year, but that's going to be used with the beans to make baked beans. We've also got a couple of sausages. They have real meat in them. I've also got potato as well, but the meat is pigeon. Now, pigeon wasn't rationed through the war, and the farmers were encouraged to shoot the wood pigeons on their land because wood pigeons damage crops. So the less damage to crops, the bigger the food supply. But of course, they weren't just going to throw away the carcasses once they'd been shot. So we can take the breasts off the pigeons, mince them, and make them into sausages. Now these sausages, as I say, also contain grated potato to bulk up the sausages and get that little bit more out of them. Black pudding, you're going to need a marrow to make that, and we're going to slice that and fry it. But of course you need something to fry it in, lard. Now nowadays far fewer people use lard for frying than it used to be the case decades ago. They tend to use vegetable oils nowadays, but lard was something that was widely used up until and during the war. Getting your hands on it was quite a challenge, but if you were a member of a pig club where your animal had gone off to slaughter, if you followed government advice, you would have been able to render the fat from the carcass as well, from any bones and joints and so on, and render it down and make this beautiful creamy white lard. So they're the ingredients. What we're missing, interestingly, we ain't got any toast, because we're following government advice to eat potatoes rather than bread. And we're not using any onions either. Onions were too precious. If you grew them on your allotment, that was great. It was probably about the only supply of onions you'd be able to get, but not everybody had allotments, so they were valuable. These were things that were given away in raffle prizes. They were given away as wedding presents. Onions were really valuable, so we've not done any onions in this one, except in the sausages. So tiny amount of onion went into there, and obviously if we padded it out, bulked it up, then we didn't need to use too many onions. So we're going to have this lot fried up now. In the frying pan we have some of the lard, and we need to put the heat underneath that for a few moments to let it melt. We've got our mock bacon, our mock black pudding, and our real tomatoes there, and we have the leftover potatoes already sliced, baking potatoes from yesterday's dinner, and in the pan we are heating up the beans in the water just to simmer them through for a few moments. Right, the beans have come up to temperature. We let them simmer for a couple of minutes and drain off the water, and we've now added the ketchup. The pan has come up to heat, the fat is melted, so we're going to put the potatoes in. And the tomatoes. The potatoes are now frying. You might be able to hear them in the background. So in the meantime, we'll have a quick chat about the sausages, because we've actually made a separate video on how to make pigeon sausages, or mock wartime pigeon sausages. So just do a search on our YouTube channel for that, and you'll find it. What we don't have with this meal is an egg, and again, it's like the onions, very difficult to get your hands on them. It always helped to have a chicken in your back garden, so a lot of people kept chickens through the war, and were able to supplement their egg supply by doing that. But we've decided in this exercise not to have an egg with the full English breakfast, because it would have just been too valuable to use in that way. The potatoes and tomatoes are now ready, so we're going to add the mock bacon and black pudding, and leave that to fry as well. So our mock bacon looks as though it is ready, and black pudding as well, which hasn't quite turned out as dark as I was expecting it to. I was expecting it to be a bit browner than that, but not to worry. What we will do is just add in the two sausages. Well, the sausages and beans are now ready. Now the sausages don't have any skins. It would have been really difficult to get sausage skins during the war, so we didn't use any. And there are our beans in homemade tomato ketchup. That is it. Right, so there we are, one mock full English breakfast. So here goes. Try the beans first. Actually, that's worked out better than I expected. Now what this has shown is that back in the war years, it was really good. A really good thing to do was to follow the government's advice on food, on how to avoid wasting it, and on how to get the most out of it. But what it also shows is that if you had a garden, it was really important to turn it over to growing vegetables, and better still, if you could get an allotment, then that was a really positive thing to have. There were nearly 1.5 million allotments in existence at the end of the war, double what was at the start. And these allotments produced millions of tons of food throughout the war years, which previously we were importing, but obviously the imports stopped during the actual war itself. So, get yourself an allotment if you're in the wartime years. Otherwise, your food supply would have been that much more restricted. But you can also see from here how large a proportion of the meal the potatoes are, because potatoes were really important. So the farmers were encouraged to grow them. You could get more calories per unit of land from growing potatoes than you could from wheat, and we were largely self-sufficient in them. So we were constantly being encouraged, eat potatoes rather than wheat, because at least half of our wheat had to be imported from North America, and that meant the Battle of the Atlantic was in the way of a lot of supplies. So here goes one rather large mock full English breakfast.